Hey y'all, welcome back to our very bookish channel. And today is a very special day. It is Leap Day. At least when this video is being posted, it's a leap day. And Jen had this really cute idea for Leap Day to do a video where we leap into a new genre. And I thought that was perfect because I know we both spoke about in book resolutions that we kind of wanted to read books outside of our comfort zone a little bit more this year. So I feel like it is the perfect opportunity to use Leap Day to leap into a new genre. And the genre that I'm leaping in today is gonna be true crime. So true crime is one of those genres that I just have not read. I'm interested in it. Obviously, I like thrillers and horror novels and true crime aspects of certain books, but I haven't actually read a lot of true crimes. I watch a lot of true crime TV. My husband loves a lot of true crime TV, so it's always on, it seems like, at our house. And there's really prolific serial killers that you read about all the time. But when I was at the bookstore browsing, I came across this book, and it was a serial killer that I was not as familiar with, and this book really caught my attention. So I have decided to read The Ultimate Evil by Mari Terry. And in case you missed our February TBR video, I am going to just read a quick synopsis that's on the back of this book for you guys so that you kind of know what this book is about. On August 10th, 1977, the NYPD arrested David Berkowitz, a mailman from Yonkers, for the Son of Sam murders that had terrorized New York City for over a year. Berkowitz confessed to shooting 16 people and killing 6 with a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver, and the case was officially closed. Journalist Mari Terry was suspicious of Berkowitz's confession, spurred by conflicting witness descriptions of the killer and clues overlooked in the investigation. Terry was convinced that Berkowitz didn't act alone. Meticulously gathering evidence for a decade, he released his findings in the first edition of The Ultimate Evil. Based upon the evidence he had uncovered, Terry theorized that the Sons of Sam attack was masterminded by a Yonkers-based cult that was also responsible for other ritual murders across the country. So this book was originally released in 1987. So that was the first edition of this book that came out, written by Mari Terry. Now, since then, this edition that came out in 2021. So Mari Terry has since passed away. He passed away in Yonkers, New York in 2015. Joshua Zeman decided to pick up his research and make a Netflix series about it. And this book has since come out, and Joshua Zeman does an introduction in the beginning of this book. I would really prefer to read the original first edition of the book, but this is the one that I found in the bookstore. I don't know, it'd probably be pretty hard to get your hands on the first edition of The Ultimate Evil that was produced in 1987. I'm very intrigued, but today is February 20th. And I'm a little bit nervous about getting this read, getting it filmed for y'all, getting all the edits done, and getting this posted by Leap Day. So I'm excited to just dive right in. Come on, you guys, let's go. Let's start reading this.
Hey guys, we are doing a fun leap year vlog where we are leaping into a new genre. And it's fun for me, especially right now, because I just am coming off a Frida vlog, and I read 3 of her books right in a row, and I love Frida to pieces, but I feel like after I read a genre too many in a row, I end up needing a break from that genre just for a little bit. And so I am very happy to be leaping into humor, because after some heavy, crazy psychological thrillers, you need some humor. So my vlog is going to be a humor book, and it's called One in a Millennial, and it's on Friendship Feelings, Fangirls Fitting In by Kate Kennedy. I'm not familiar with Kate Kennedy. I don't know anything about her. The top comment on here was something that kind of drew me into this one. It says, deliciously nostalgic and brain-tinglingly astute. That is a lot of There's a lot going on in those words. Kate Kennedy has Gilmore Girls' snappy voice, Taylor Swift style emotional relatability, and a witty wisdom all her own. Can you try, if you would even try saying that sentence when you're drunk, that would not come out that way whatsoever. But Amanda Montell, author of Cultish and Word Slut, wrote that. So I thought this would be an interesting dive into some culture from the 90s and the 2000s. And hopefully it's as humorous as it is saying it is. I need some humor right now. So let's dig into One in a Millennial by Kate Kennedy. So as we dive into Kate Kennedy's One a Millennial, I really like the inside cover. It just kind of screams the humor genre. A lot of these things I recognize. I see a lava lamp. I actually had one of those when I was in college. One of the cameras that were like the throwaway camera. And I don't know if the scarf is a homage to Taylor Swift and All Too Well, and because Red came out in the 2000s, but also there's an iPod, there's Uggs, there's a flip phone, and I think it's kind of strange that there's one of those lollipop ring. And I even see, I remember those shoes being popular in the 90s, and old style computers are there. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I really think it's funny that they have all of these little comical icons on the beginning. And then also inside our chapter, where she goes, part 1 is over the 90s, part 2 is the 2000s. She kind of has cheeky chapter titles on here. One of them, Saved by the Bell Jar, which is kind of funny because it's a play on words with both Saved by the Bell, which was a popular TV series, and Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which was a very depressing book. So I'm kind of curious to see what that means. And then the third part is about today. So very curious to see how this goes. And we have Nancy Drew going to be my bookmark as we head into the prologue.
Hey y'all, I have a little bit of an update for you. I am on page 58 of The Ultimate Evil, and so far you're just sort of learning about some of the victims. The very first victims you're following, the murder takes place at Stanford, and it says, which I'm a little confused because it does say on the back that he was arrested in Yonkers, New York. So I don't know, maybe he traveled, maybe the heat got too much in California and he went to New York. So I don't know, we're gonna find out. But so far, very interesting. You're following some of the victims, you're learning a little bit about them, their history, why they were where they were the night that they were murdered, and you know, the kind of people they are. So I really like that about this novel. So far, it's been very detailed and it's been very good about giving you the background, the setting, so you can learn a little bit about what was going on in this time period and who the victims were and what the killer did. So you're getting facts, a little bit of background information, and I'm really liking it so far.
All right, time for an update. I am past part 1, or up to part 2, I should say. And it's just over 100 pages. And I feel like it's definitely at times laugh out loud funny. Very dry humor. A lot of great observations of girlhood, because what she has written about so far is basically things that she remembers in cultural moments being a young girl. And I believe it was a majority of the 90s, because the next part says the 2000s, or she calls them the aughts. So some of that I can relate to. In the 90s, I was part middle school, part high school, and then going into college. So some of it, I was different ages when she would have been experiencing these things. I never did much with like American Girl. I was more Barbie when I was little. American Girl wasn't a thing or wasn't invented when I was younger. And she references the Barbie though, because Barbie's been popular forever. And she references the talking Barbie. And I remember that because it was a controversy at the time. Barbie would say phrases, and one of them that was very controversial and ended up getting it pulled was "math is hard." I think that's the phrase. And she just talks about how we are taught as young girls to be a certain way and to be interested in beauty and boys, but yet it's also held against us. And she goes into, she kind of talks about religion and Bible camps and purity rings and how you're really taught to imagine this future husband when you're a young girl. You're also taught not to have sex and to make sure that you're saving yourself for marriage. So it's a lot of things that I feel I have read, both fiction and memoirs or biographies of what young girls go through growing up. And I feel like as much as this was in humor, and definitely it is very humorous, like I said, there were laugh out loud moments, it is also reading like a memoir. And I'm not sure if all humor books are like this, or maybe not all memoirs are with this much humor, maybe. But it does kind of feel like a memoir so far. Other things that she talked about were sleepovers when you're a young girl, and I remember those very clearly. There are just things that she's bringing up that does make you nostalgic for things that you have done growing up as a girl. And I was more 80s though, so there are a lot of things that she doesn't remember or obviously isn't talking about because she wasn't born yet. So I partially can relate, but I would consider, I know there's always terms for different generations, but there's also those that were born between like those generations. So I think the official term that I would go by is Zennial, which is like Generation X and a mixture of millennial. And I can put on the screen the definition for a Zennial if you aren't familiar with it.
Nothing else makes me feel high. She's like such a light. This girl.
But I always think it's funny that we have these boxes that we put people in terms of generations. And I know millennials got a lot of flack, and she talks about that a lot, that they got a lot of flack for things that are known to them. And I do remember some of that. I don't know how much I feel like that's a thing anymore, but I know that a lot of the current generations are experiencing, there's like a, I don't know, a fight among the generations, like the okay boomer. I know boomer gets a lot of flack, and I also joke at work how much I feel like I'm just an inner boomer, that I just have like an older mentality. But I think Generation X and bits of millennial are what I'm really like. That's the generation of things that I would be able to relate to. She talks a lot about, and I didn't have the AOL Messenger. I remember going to college, computers, where it makes me sound so old. Computers were just being a thing when I was going into college. But that would be around the time I think AOL was out, and I didn't experience that because I was at college. So we did experience email in college and computers and all that. And cell phones started to become a thing. But I guess there was a lot, if you were a certain age when that came out, seems to be a lot of angst if you were like a teenager. And she talks a lot about seeing her crushes online. And I think all of that, there would be a certain age group that would really identify with that, but that wasn't something I wasn't a part of. So I wasn't really getting a lot of that. So far it's been very enjoyable to see her cultural observations and just talking about some of the things that all girls experience growing up. So that has been interesting. Now it's the 2000s, and I think she's going to start getting into probably like high school years, maybe going into college. I'm not sure. And I'm very interested to see what she talks about next. And I think at some point I'm going to pull out some of the funnier moments, because I was thinking about that as I was reading, that I should be notating some of the things that I can give examples of her dry humor, things I found funny. So I'm going to pull some of those out at some point while I'm doing my vlog for this. So I'm going to continue on and see how she feels about her later teenage years and 20s. It'll be interesting to see her commentary.
Hey guys, I have an update for you. It has been a couple of days and I have finished part 1. I'm on part 2 now of The Ultimate Evil. And the first part in this book is divided into 2 parts. And the first part of this book is laying the groundwork. So you're learning about the shootings that occurred, and you learn about a murder that happened in Stanford and out in California at the college. You're also learning about how the police investigations are going. You're learning about eyewitness testimonies. You're learning about the author and how he got involved in researching this and investigating this case. And it's really just laying the groundwork. I think he does present evidence that contradicts what the mainstream narrative was regarding this case. Ultimately, I know that Maury Terry believes that David Berkowitz, who is the man that was arrested for these murders and attempted murders, and he's basically been charged with all of the murders. They wanted to group them all together and lay them all at his feet. But Terry Maury believes that he's not solely responsible. I don't think he's trying to say, well, he's not saying that David Berkowitz is innocent, not at all, but he just thinks that this goes a lot deeper and there is a lot more people involved than what the press has told us, or according to the information that the police have actually released. There's just a lot more to the story. And he does name some names in here. Now you have to remember this did take place in the 1970s, so these are pretty old murders. A lot of people that were involved as adults in this case are either very old or have passed on. So there are names named, but they're not really a lot of names that I recognized or that I know of. He does kind of lay out the details and some pretty convincing groundwork for the fact that something else was going on, or that, you know, at least all of the evidence that we know of doesn't quite add up. So David Berkowitz has been arrested. They did catch him, and what his testimony is and what he is admitting to does not line up with some of the evidence presented in the case by eyewitnesses and by like a parking ticket. He gets a parking ticket, which is what ultimately leads to his arrest. And the theory so far has been there's a group of people trying to foment chaos, and David Berkowitz is a part of this group, and he kind of just became the fall guy. So they are just trying to blame everything on him. So he takes the fall and the case is closed and everyone else involved is not prosecuted. So that's where we're at. I'm going to start part 2. Part 2 is called Web of Conspiracy, The Dominoes Fall. So I think this part of the book is going to veer off of the straight up facts and off of this groundwork. And Maury Terry is going to try to explain more of his thoughts that veer away from the mainstream media narrative and why he thinks what he believes in. So I am curious to get into the second part. I will probably just follow up the next time I talk to you guys, I will probably just give my final thoughts on the book, because the way this book is laid out, it's very hard to keep everything straight, to keep everything together. This book so far has been kind of cumbersome to process everything, and I am against a deadline because we are getting this out on Leap Day. So I am up against a deadline. I can't really take my time and absorb everything. So I'll probably go back and reread this book over a long period of time and kind of get more into the true crime books. So yeah, that's just my update for now, and I will let you know what I think in final thoughts.
Right, time for some more thoughts. I have been reading the 2000s portion of One in a Millennial, and she's not really saying how old she is per se. I'm assuming it's like a middle school going into high school, I guess, age. And I think the first part where she is getting very obsessive about school supplies, and I'm trying to remember how old I was when I was that obsessive about school supplies, because I was. I don't know if all girls go through this. I've certainly talked to other girls or other women talking about like an obsessive thought process around school supplies, and I was like that when I was younger. Mentions I want to say designer. I don't know. I don't even know if it's a real person. I gotta look it up. Her name was Lisa Frank. And those that are around my age, and I guess up through her age, which I think she's 10 years younger than me, will be very familiar with Lisa Frank. But if you're not, here are some screenshots of Lisa Frank's work.
It's her. Nothing else makes me feel high. She's like such a light. This girl, something about it changed my state of mind.
And I feel like I was like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, somewhere around there, where I loved getting the Lisa Frank like stickers. I remember having pen pals and getting stationery, and I was just obsessed with school supplies. Hers goes into being obsessive about handwriting, and she compares it to popularity. I'm not entirely sure. I wasn't understanding. I definitely didn't look at things that way, and I didn't understand what she was trying to say about the popularity portion and how she was comparing it to handwriting skills. But she does go into some popularity in how it's reflected in the culture and movies. And she brings up Saved by the Bell. Now, I watched Saved by the Bell, but I don't feel like I saw it or thought about it as much as she did. But for me, and she briefly mentions Beverly Hills 90210, and those of us who were obsessed with it in the 90s just know it as 90210. I mean, I was seriously obsessed with that show. And she said she was too young to watch that. So I guess that's why she was talking about Saved by the Bell, and that's what she loved. And then she goes into a lot of how women were portrayed. She didn't feel like the girls on Saved by the Bell were portrayed in a good way. And Jessie Spano, one of the characters, is like the feminist of the show, but they would continually, like the other characters would mock her for laughs. And then she has other examples that I don't really remember at the minute, her other examples of other shows, because it was ones that I didn't necessarily watch. But she felt like it was really difficult for girls and women around this time. But I just thought, it seems like it's always hard for girls and women. I don't feel like there's a set amount of time, because just think about over how many years that things have been difficult for women. So I wouldn't say that it's hard. You don't really want to compare and contrast it. I think she has a lot of great points. I'm not saying that she's not correct. It's just hard for me to think about just that time period because I didn't think of things like that at the time. But she talks about diet culture and how there was a lot of emphasis on women being really skinny, but I feel like, again, that has been for years and years and years. I wouldn't say it's just about the 2000s, but that's when she experienced it. And that's when you see it, I guess, more in pop culture, because we have become more advanced in terms of everything that we're feeding in the media to young girls. And she's looking at it at TV shows and movies. There was reality shows that becoming popular, and then there's Facebook. She talks about how Facebook became popular around that time, and then girls started comparing themselves to each other at a larger level. And to that point, yes, that would be difficult because it was hard enough before, but now you have so many more images to compare yourself to. And she really sounds like she struggled with a lot of that. She ends up talking about going to college and how hard it was for her going to college. Felt like high school was definitely more of a supportive atmosphere for her. And something I was thinking about as I was reading this part is this really is reading like a memoir. Like the whole point of why we're doing this video is to talk about a genre that we haven't really read before. But this is really reminding me of a memoir. And she does things very cheeky, and she says things with a dry humor. And I feel like she is really good at saying things in a way that makes it humorous. But I also feel like I'm really reading a memoir with her just having observations about pop culture. So I don't know what the line is between what a humor book is considered versus a memoir. Maybe it's just a mixture of the two. I mean, obviously I have read memoirs before, and that's why I'm thinking of it a lot and evaluating it a lot, because the whole point of this video is for us to try and do something we haven't really done. Now, I haven't read a memoir in a while other than Britney Spears last year, so it is still outside of my comfort zone. I'm still leaping into a genre I don't read consistently, so it still kind of fits what we're doing. It reminds me a lot of, there was a memoir that I read in college that I absolutely loved. I ended up having it as part of my senior thesis, and it's called Prozac Nation by Elizabeth Wurtzel. And it was a memoir, but it's often found in like psychology, because it was about her experience taking Prozac when Prozac first became a thing in 1986. And she saw everything clearly for the first time because she had such bad depressive episodes. And when she talks about in college how she went through a really bad depression time in her life, really bad depressive episodes, it really made me think of Prozac Nation. And that's when I start thinking like, wow, this is really kind of like a memoir. So that's where I am right now. I still have some of the 2000s to read. And then after the 2000s, it goes over to current day. So I will come back with more thoughts when I have read another chunk. Okay, I didn't get too far. When I said I wanted to share earlier some of the bits that were making me laugh, and I got to, it's still in the 2000s, and I'm almost done with that chunk because she has it in like 3 different groups. But this made me really laugh, and I hope it's not taken too much out of context. She was talking about how much, and everyone in their teen years, I think, can identify when you are listening to music and really getting emotional and really getting into song lyrics. And she was talking about boy bands and Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. And she was saying how it made her so emotional for wanting to one day meet the love of her life and be able to experience what's in those songs. And then she said, if I did actually encounter a BSB or NSYNC, obviously Backstreet Boys or NSYNC moment in real life while dating, I probably would sooner assume I was about to get murdered than be flattered if someone I just met claimed to be drowning in my love. What's attractive about someone I barely know having so few hobbies or interests that they claim everything they'll ever need is in my eyes. Like, I'm cute, but I'm not that great. Now, I would sniff out this situation quickly. If a guy barely knows you and talks like that, it's not personal, it's not poetry, it's performative. And it's quite embarrassing that despite not knowing these people personally and literally only seeing them perform, that never really clicked. When you don't have a lot of romantic experiences or don't feel like the community or cultural context you're in allows for safe exploration of relationships or sex, you look to media and friends and magazines to prepare yourself for what to expect. So if you're anything like me, I don't blame us for hoping for the best. But the funny part was, if you actually ever encountered things that happen, and because, you know, obviously it's very extreme in songs, but it just made me laugh when she was like, wait, I'm about to get murdered if you're that, you know, obsessed with me. So it was just a funny moment I thought I would share.
Hey y'all, it is a couple of days later and I have finished The Ultimate Evil by Mari Terry, and this book is not at all what I was expecting. This book is so deep. There is so much information in here. There are so many theories that this journalist expresses his beliefs in. And I just was not expecting such a deep dive rabbit hole. This book is the entrance to probably like 100 different rabbit holes that you can go down. I've had a really hard time trying to process all of the information in here in a rational, succinct way without talking for hours and hours about this book. Ultimately, I'm just gonna say I've done the best that I can in trying to put this in some logical order to explain this book, and if it's something that you're interested in, then I would just recommend going out and buying the book and reading it. But I am gonna say this is not a book that you can sit down and just read through casually. I mean, I guess you technically can, but I went into this as my first true crime novel, just expecting the book to read like you would see a true crime TV show, where you just go along this process of this happened, and this person was caught by this method, and they confessed and they went to jail, or, you know, they got the death penalty, or whatever the case is, or they died on this day, or whatever. But this just really theorizes a lot more deeply concepts, and it's just something like I'm thinking about, because I feel like since I'm on a time limit with this, we want to get this vlog out on Leap Day. I'm going to go through, reread the book, and try to digest more of the information. So first, this book opens up by following a young woman named Arliss, and she is a newlywed 19-year-old young woman, and her husband moved to Stanford because he is studying to be a doctor, and one evening they get in a fight, and Arliss decides that she wants to mail out a letter and go to church. She drops off this letter and she goes to church to do her praying. She ends up getting murdered in this church. The police kind of write this off as some crazy killer that did something crazy to a beautiful young girl. And that murder goes unsolved. Then you jump to Yonkers, New York, which is around New York City, probably just north of New York City. And there are lots of shootings that happen. These happen very quickly in the middle of the night. They're targeting young women, but there are some men with the young women that get caught in the crosshairs and do become victims as well. Mari Terry is a investigative journalist that lives in Yonkers, and he follows this crime very closely because it takes place in his hometown, and it became a really big deal. In the process of Mari following these strings of shootings, he notices that some of the information presented to the public doesn't really make sense. He doesn't necessarily take the news just for their word at face value, and he starts kind of looking into it a little bit further on his own. Since David Berkowitz is caught, and the media and the police try to just say, okay, it's done, it's over, you guys can relax now, we caught our guy, we did our job, case closed. But Maury believes David did not act alone, and he thinks there are more killers out there. So he starts digging even more into these murders. And all the evidence he uncovers by doing this leads him to a man named John Carr. Maury also finds out that John Carr was linked to a group of people that called themselves the Process Church of the Final Judgment. So after this case and this book originally was published in 1983, the Process Church has since changed their name. And then I have no idea what happened to this group since then. And that is a whole nother rabbit hole that I am not going to go down right now. So, or maybe ever, I don't know. And so what became of this group is a whole nother rabbit hole you can go down if you want to. But this Process Church group was into very dark occult practices and beliefs. So Maury believed that this group operated all over the United States, and they were essentially dark occultists that would be hired hitmans, like maybe assassins. So to this day, David Berkowitz is still alive. He is 70 years old, and he's being held at the Shawangunk Correctional Facility. I have no idea if I'm saying that rightly. Now, Maury Terry, who is the journalist that wrote this book and investigated these crimes, has passed away. He passed away in 2015 of heart failure at the age of 69. But before he passed away, he gave a lot of his research to a man named Joshua Zeman, who is the producer of the Netflix series regarding the Son of Sam murder. And this series is called The Sons of Sam, A Descent into Darkness. If that's something that you want to find on Netflix, it's a 4-part series. And that's really all I know about the series. I don't have Netflix. I haven't watched it. I don't know what it's about, but Joshua Zeman does do a foreword in the beginning of this book, this version of the book. This is the newest version. So if that's something you're interested in, then you can check that out if you want to. Overall, I just find this book very interesting. I think it's a very interesting thing to consider and look into if you want to. I really don't think anything more is going to come of this. As it stands, as far as I know now, David Berkowitz took the fall for everything, and people are content to just let that lie and let that be. And I think that's where it's going to stay. But I just think it's kind of fun to consider some of these other theories and think about them a little bit. So if that's something you're interested in, I recommend this book. If you are just looking for a true crime book where you can just read through it and it reads like one of the true crime shows on TV, this is probably not the book for you, because like I mentioned, it does like get into some deep theories and send you down some rabbit holes. So if you're not prepared for that, like I wasn't, I avoided any more research and going down the rabbit holes. So I'm just leaving it right here. But if this is something that interests you and something you want to do some research on, I do think this is a really good book. I am really glad that I read it. It does get you thinking about things and more about some of the occult things that we aren't privy to as just regular human beings out here in the world, and things that we don't want to be involved in at all that are really scary.
Hey guys, here are my final thoughts on our leap into a new genre, which I had, as you saw me talking about, One in a Millennial by Kate Kennedy. She also has a podcast that I meant to check out before I did final thoughts, and I didn't get a chance, but I am curious to see what her podcast is like. The last chunk, I didn't end up doing any added sound bites or any reflections because it was very short, for one, and for two, it was a lot more about her career and how much she put into everything that is her career today. So it wasn't so much about reflections on pop culture as much as it was the first 2/3 of this book. She does have some funny moments talking about the Spice Girls, and she has a moment at a Starbucks that I thought was really funny, that she got a pumpkin spice latte, and as everybody knows, that is a funny observation, and she talks about how everyone always makes fun of the basic white bitch who gets the pumpkin spice latte. So she gets it at a Starbucks, and the barista calls out the order but also says her name and pumpkin spice latte, and she gets very embarrassed and sits there for a while before she goes to pick it up because she doesn't want everyone to know that it's her drink order. I don't mind pumpkin spice. I mean, I don't know how much I would be embarrassed by getting that as an order, but I don't know how much. As I said, I'm more of a zillennial, but I don't identify as much with the millennial as a group. I feel like I am parts Gen X, parts millennial. As I had said and showed you guys, a zillennial. And I was going to do something like 90s or early 2000s for this just to be funny. And the best I came up with is this is my college that I went to, which was in the 90s. That's the best I can do. I don't even know what you could do for a 90s look. I don't have anything else that's really 90s. So the best you got, neon yellow shirt from my college. So I enjoyed having another genre to read, and it was a nice break after reading 3 Fridas in a row. I do feel like I want to break it up more often, but nothing against her or this book. As I was reading that last chunk, I feel like as much as it went quickly, it was losing my interest. I think I had just been reading this too long, even though it's only been a few days. And it was just time for me to get back into fiction of some sort. I didn't enjoy the last part of this as much as the first 2/3 of her story. And I kept thinking of this as a memoir. I couldn't get that out of my head. It kept reading to me like a memoir. And I know she had a lot of observations on culture. She had a lot of things in pop culture that she would talk about. And I feel like I really liked her humor. I would say like 50% of the time I could relate to her and what she was talking about. And the other half I didn't really have as an experience. It was interesting to read about, but I really thought this was going to be more of a nostalgic read. And there were a lot of interesting things, but I think I end up sitting in this space that is more 80s where I grew up than what she experienced in like the 90s. Now, I mean, I was in middle school, high school, and college in the 90s. So, and then I was in my early 20s at the early 2000s. So a lot of it I recognized and I remember, but I think it was just different in terms of my childhood before that. And even though she brought a lot of humor to what she was talking about, so beyond a memoir and observations, she had a lot of dialogue about what it's like to be a girl and a woman growing up in the time period that she did. And again, I wasn't necessarily expecting that. It's not that I didn't enjoy reading that. I just wasn't expecting it. And I think I was going into this thinking like it's going to be really funny, very light, but ended up being like heavier subjects in here. And though she makes light of it, it just wasn't what I was expecting. So I think it was like kind of bringing me down a little bit. I still really enjoyed reading it because it was different than the crazy psychological thrillers that I have been reading recently. And to me, I really enjoyed doing something that was outside of our norm. I would definitely read another humor book. I don't know if they're all going to read like memoirs, but I don't mind memoirs. I just don't know. I don't think I knew what to expect getting a humor book. And so it definitely wasn't something that I felt was torturous or bad. I am now ready to dive back into another psychological thriller. I would suggest if you like memoirs, if you really like pop culture observations and grew up in the 90s and 2000s, you will definitely love this book. She is really funny and I am curious to see what her podcast is like. Thanks for watching as we leapt into another genre, and until next time.